Welcome to ESG Decoded, where we navigate the evolving landscape of environmental, social, and governance, ESG. Join me, Amanda Kuhl, and Erika Schiller as we explore the intersection of sustainability, innovation, and ethical leadership. We have a special podcast for you today. Today's episode is a crossover with ESG Decoded and Energy Crossroads. Energy Crossroads is a podcast powered by the Houston Advanced Research Center, or HARC for short. HARC is a research hub providing independent analysis on energy, air, water issues to people seeking scientific answers. They are underwritten by the Texas State Energy Conservation Office and the Mitchell Foundation. Energy Crossroad is where HARC explores conversation with industry leaders around clean energy trends and related technology, finance, the built environment, and policy opportunities impacting your organization. So I hope you agree there's a natural fit between ESG Decoded and Energy Crossroads. Welcome to all our ESG Decoded listeners. Welcome to all our Energy Crossroad listeners. I am your host, Amanda Kuhl. Today, we are going to deep dive into the just transition. What does it mean? How are we progressing? And what's happening in the public and private sectors? And I'm personally very excited to learn from two experts with me today. First of all, it's Marina Badoian-Kriticos, the Director of Strategic Initiatives and External Affairs at Houston Advanced Research Center. And then Emma Cox, the Executive Vice President of Commercial at ClimeCo. I'll let our guests introduce themselves so you can get a little familiar with their voices and who they are. Marina, will you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Great. Thanks so much, Amanda. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. As mentioned, my name is Marina, and I head up strategic initiatives at HARC, which is a sustainability-focused research hub that's based in the Woodlands, Texas. And for over 40 years, HARC's been applying science to drive energy, air, water, climate equity, and resilience solutions for a sustainable and equitable future. And my focus really is on that intersection of energy, climate, and resilience strategies that advance environmental, social, and corporate governance, integration, and sustainability performance. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you and Emma today, Amanda.
Thanks, Marina. Thanks for being here. Emma, will you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much, Amanda. Hello from Chicago. And as Amanda mentioned, I'm the Executive Vice President for ClimeCo of the Commercial Group, which means that I'm responsible for our business development and our marketing efforts. I have a background in sort of all things ESG and sustainability consulting, specifically with expertise in energy efficiency, and renewable energy, having led a global renewable energy program for a large quick service restaurant corporation. Happy to be here today.
I'm excited. So let's dive in. Marina, help us understand, what does this mean? What is a just transition?
Yeah, that's a great and very, very full question. Basically, a just energy transition, this is a term that's been used a lot lately. And what we're finding is that perception and definition can vary depending on the different stakeholders. Broadly, it's being defined as a shift from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy in a manner that's equitable and really supports sustainable development, a healthy economy, and a safe and clean environment. The goal is to ensure that the benefits of this shift are shared widely and in a manner that supports not only organizations and corporations, but also vulnerable populations, and supports them in a manner that doesn't cost community members jobs, health, or negatively impact the environment. And if there are any losses, then these communities should be compensated appropriately. There's several key principles that underpin the just transition. Foundationally, that this transition should be based and steeped in science. Evidence-based research and really scientific facts should be the underpinning for this, that the process should promote community engagement. In this manner, we can ensure that the benefit flows are widely shared, even though this can be complex, but if companies can work with their neighbors and place an emphasis on figuring out ways to deliver benefits, then that's a way that truly transformative change can be brought about. And that the transition should ensure transparent decision-making and access to reliable information for all impacted people, with a goal of resulting in a robust economy and a clean environment. And I think one of the big challenges that we face today with this energy transition is really figuring out, how do we embrace the challenges that the communities are concerned with? How do we embrace the challenges of organizations? And then how do we truly embrace equity-centered community engagement to end up with outcomes that serve all involved?
Emma, is there a way to measure how we're progressing, how we're doing along this transition?
Amanda, I think that's a great question, and one that I think many stakeholders struggle with, right? So when we talk about the just transition, I think it can come to life on different levels, right? So on a macro level, we can look from an international standpoint on how different countries are progressing along sort of their just transition. And I know that there is one framework that particularly measures just transition, which is under the social progress imperative. They have a just transition score in which, the US, I'll cut to the punchline, the US is falling short, right? So we are currently ranked 127th globally on the just transition score, performing worse than other major economies like China, which is 108th, Russia 119th, and those that are sort of winning the just transition race are countries like France and the UK. And so I would say the US has a combination of high carbon emissions, but also relatively low social progress. So we have a long way to go. And I think on a more micro level, we can look at, I think it's important to mention that the just transition happens at a more local level, right? Because as Marina mentioned, we need to acknowledge that historically marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by climate change. And so when we take a look at those communities, we think about how to influence progress and the transition into a clean energy that is accessible to all. And so, what can companies do? What can local governments do? So, how do we measure what companies can do? I'll take a step back and just talk about sort of my thoughts for some of the thematic areas for measurement for the just transition, which more broadly, we can talk about employment and skills. We can talk about sort of equality and well-being, sort of democratic participation, community empowerment and revitalization, environmental protection and decarbonization. Those are sort of the broad themes that we can explore for measurement. But I think when we dig into what are sort of some of the broader key performance indicators, we can look more closely at workforce metrics. So, job creation in green sectors. We can look at sort of reskilling and retraining programs and the percentage of diversity in new green jobs that are introduced, right? We can also look at sort of economic diversification. So, what is the level of investment in new low carbon industries? We can look at social equity measures. So, fuel poverty rates or access to green spaces and transport. And we can also sort of look at community engagement, so participation in transition dialogues, stakeholder engagement events. And then more broadly, we can look at decarbonization, and that can come in the form of, emissions reductions and renewable energy deployment. So that is a broad sort of overview of how we can measure. I think at a company level, they might look at it a little bit differently, right? So you can look at how they're incorporating the just transition or environmental justice into their planning, right? So how does it fit into their climate action plans? What is the social dialogue? Just talking about and acknowledging the fact that there is this disproportionate sort of effect of climate change is going a long way. And then, what are they doing to create more green jobs? If you're a corporation purchasing renewable energy, how many green jobs are you adding by helping to bring that project online? So those are a few sort of thoughts that I have around how we can go about measuring this, but I think we'll have to continue to iterate as this movement evolves over time.
I think that's helpful to understand kind of also the levers that we can invest money in, whether it's the public sector or the private sector. So I think that's really helpful. Marina, can you talk a little bit about what is happening in the public sector, maybe more specifically what's happening kind of in Texas or the Gulf Coast region?
Yes, definitely. I think that there definitely has been a shift over the course of the past few years here in the Gulf Coast region. And I think a lot of it is stemming from what we've seen come down from the federal government and the current federal administration. A lot of the policy-driven changes that we're seeing really are being pushed from the Biden executive order 14,008, which establishes the Justice 40 initiative. And this is an initiative which is setting the direction for federally funded activities and really has the potential to drive engagement actions beyond federal expectation to include some of the work that we're seeing now in the private sector. And this really has been a significant shift when it comes to, for example, community engagement and stakeholder engagement, which, as Emma mentioned, these are complex and really interwoven pieces. And this really is an opportunity for a shift to where and how organizations work with communities to drive forward these hard conversations to reach more equitable and fair outcomes. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the Justice 40 initiative calls for 40% of all benefits of certain federal investments to flow to communities that are named as disadvantaged by the federal government. So really the question then comes down to how the investments that Emma was talking about, how the communities, and then of course how the benefits are defined. And so for this program, for the Department of Energy, for example, the covered programs include climate change programs, climate energy and energy efficiency, affordable and sustainable housing, clean transportation, training and workforce development related to clean and renewable energy, clean water and waste infrastructure, and remediation and reduction of legacy pollution. Now, this is quite an investment in the arena of energy transition. And as you can see, there's a lot of opportunity to deliver energy in more sustainable ways. And the types of investments that are covered under this really are federal grants and procurement spending, financing that includes loan guarantees, direct financial benefits, and programmatic staffing costs. And then the definition of the disadvantaged communities can include a group of individuals living in geographic proximity or a geographically dispersed set of individuals where either type of group experience and common conditions are measurable through metrics, mappable through data, and are identifiable through census tracts. So there's a ton of tools and databases that have been developed to help identify if communities fit into these criteria. Some of the ones that we've been seeing popping up recently are the EPA IRA Disadvantaged Communities Map and the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. If you haven't taken a look at either one of those, do a quick Google and dive in. There's a great opportunity to really get your hands into some of this data and see graphically how these different data sets are visualized. And then for the DOE specific, there was a look at 36 burden indicators across 4 categories of fossil dependence, energy burden, environmental and climate hazards, and socioeconomic vulnerabilities. And this includes a wide variety of data, including PM 2.5, if the community is a food desert, if they have access to internet, climate hazards, and so much more. So this data, along with the census and the other data we talked about earlier, is then mapped, and the recipient of federal funds is required to identify ways in which that they anticipate that the benefits of the project and the harms will flow to communities, and ways that they plan to mitigate those potential harms, and also how they're going to ensure that a minimum of 40% of the benefits will flow to local communities. And that's a lot, but just basically to set the stage at a federal level, where we are, and then seeing how this is trending to some of the local work that we're seeing in the market here along the Gulf Coast, and definitely flows directly to 2 quite large federal grants that have hit the Gulf Coast Houston area recently through the bipartisan infrastructure law, providing funding opportunities for investments in the resilience of our infrastructure and deployment of clean energy technologies. Last fall, for example, the partnership for the High Velocity Hydrogen Hub was selected by the Department of Energy for the development of a regional clean hydrogen hub. And this partnership includes a collaborative of global energy partners, industry, labor, academia, for-profits, government, basically just an alphabet soup of a cross-section of folks. And HARC's really proud and excited to be a part of supporting the development of the community benefits plan for this project. And that includes community and labor engagement, investing in the American workforce, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, and then also ensuring that accountability that I talked about earlier, and that benefits that flow to communities. And as Emma stated, really figuring out how we measure this in an impactful way truly is really important. And then this spring, Texas Solar for All Coalition was awarded nearly $250 million from the EPA to accelerate investments in low-income solar and storage. And the goal of this is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, close the solar equity gap for energy burdened low-income families, and create good green jobs in Texas. And again, HARC's excited to be part of this team that's expected to deliver distributed solar to over 46,000 low-income and disadvantaged community households over a 5-year period. So we can see, where we're seeing investment in these are large, but we're seeing it on smaller scale as well, but 2 large projects here in the Gulf Coast area, and really looking at the opportunities to look at this not only from an economic perspective for the organization, but where there are opportunities for community engagement as well. And this also flows through to a project that Amanda, we're working with your team on through the Department of Energy's On-Site Energy Technical Assistance Partnership, or the TAP. HARC's been excited to be part of the TAP program for over a decade, and we were thrilled to be awarded this new opportunity that helps industrial facilities and other large energy users increase the adoption of on-site energy technologies across the South Central region, which includes Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Texas. And so for the next 3 years, we're going to be working closely with your team, providing industrial facilities with initial site screenings, identifying on-site energy opportunities, and offering more advanced analysis to support these project installations. And really looking at opportunities for program and policy development and expansion to improve industrial decarbonization and resilience, while looking at ways that we can lower operating costs across sectors, providing benefits to the larger, broader community. So definitely, there's pieces that are happening at the macro scale. We're seeing site-specific pieces. And then even across the Houston region, the Greater Houston Partnership, Houston Energy Transition Initiative, or HEDI, has really been moving forward to help add to a number of tools and resources that are readily available to help organizations identify not only just transition, but environmental justice concerns, and to help benefit flows equitably. And so there was a climate equity framework and toolkit for an equitable energy transition in Greater Houston that was developed by HARC and Sally Greenberg Consulting for HEDI to provide comprehensive insights and best practices for engagement between energy companies and the community's impact. But really, I would say that the findings of that research can translate across to a number of different industries and market verticals. And then Emma had mentioned a few of the tools that are out there. And, in addition, I think I had mentioned earlier about the EPA EJ screen. There's also the Council on Environmental Quality, the CJUST, or the Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool, to help identify communities experiencing burdens and the types of burdens the community is facing. And then, of course, there's the Department of Energy Energy Justice Dashboard, which helps identify DOE investments that have a J40 focus. So kind of taking it back up to the macro again, but just to say that there's a lot happening in this space. There's a lot of really forward movement and a lot of two-way engagement that we're seeing both from communities as well as organizations and local governments.
It gives me hope that we can actually achieve this. And we're also very appreciative to be able to partner with HARC and the DOE technical assistance provider for the South Central region. So thank you, Marina, for that opportunity. Emma, will you tell us what's happening on the corporate side? And you had kind of teased this up earlier about some of the things, but let's dive a little bit deeper into that these last few minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I think this is really important because ClimeCo, we have these conversations with our clients all the time. And to us, it's sort of, a non-negotiable. A just transition and environmental justice has to be a part of the strategy that we help our clients with. And so we have developed an environmental justice focused sort of layer to our renewable energy and lens to our renewable energy strategy development that we work with our clients on incorporating. And that includes listening, really doing a lot of community engagement and listening and engaging at the local level and incorporating that feedback into the corporate strategy. So we're really proud of that work. And I know we have an upcoming podcast that goes deeper into that. So stay tuned, and I'll just tease that here. But I wanted to back up a little bit, Amanda, because in preparing for this podcast, I did a bit of research on how companies are publicly talking about their contributions to a just transition. And it's interesting, right? The space is very sensitive right now, I will say. And with a lot of this green hushing activity happening right now, I would say that that extends to conversation around just transition and environmental justice. So what a lot of what we're seeing out there are public statements they lack sort of definition around a plan, right? And so I'll give you an example. A large corporation I found out there is talking about their environmental justice and just transition contributions by, talking about, they're developing their workforce for both sort of traditional and low carbon energy businesses. They're empowering local economic growth. They're mitigating sort of what might be potential negative impacts of their operations. They are pledging to engage and support communities. They're building low carbon emissions business and also sort of not necessarily committing to stepping away from traditional energy operations, right? So I think, this is a step in the right direction, but I think what I'm seeing and in conversations with other large corporations, there's hesitancy to really put a finer point on a plan. And so I think it's really imperative for us to start talking about the just transition and these tools that Marina mentioned at a federal level and a local level that we can all sort of leverage and have access to. And I really just think that general education and getting companies comfortable with talking about their plans is going to be important. I also want to talk a little bit about my personal experience leading a renewable energy program. And it was really a fascinating experience where, you talk about how do we incorporate community impact into a renewable energy procurement strategy. And we've talked a lot about the framework around the just transition and the different components and criteria that we need to consider. And it's all very important. But if I take a moment just to sort of simplify what the just transition means, it really means to be equitable and fair, right? And to do that, you need to listen. So as a corporation, it starts with listening, and it starts with listening to the communities and the folks that are impacted by these renewable energy projects that are going into their community, right? And so this company that I worked with was very mindful of that. They are a community-focused business. Their operations are located in communities all around the globe, and so this was really important to them to make sure that these communities were being heard and that their feedback was being incorporated into a corporate strategy. Because at the end of the day, a renewable energy project is a huge sort of tax revenue infusion into those local communities. It adds local jobs, and you want to be mindful as a corporation that these are considerations that are very important to make sure that, the communities are playing a role in implementing these large renewable energy projects. So I think that these lessons can be applied to a lot of other corporate climate initiatives and how we engage with the communities that are affected. And it starts with listening. So I wanted to talk about that a bit. And I know, Amanda, we're out of time. So just let me know if we need to stop there.
We are at time. I feel like with every podcast, there's probably another 30 minutes that we could dive in, but unfortunately, we are at time. But I feel like one of my takeaways is that there are so many tools. There's a lot of data out there, and so to help either the public sector or the private sector to advance this, and we'll make sure to link up as many of the tools and data sources that were mentioned on the podcast today. I'm just really appreciative of Emma and Marina, both your times to share what we could in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Whether you're a seasoned ESG practitioner or embarking on your sustainability journey, ESG Decoded is your trusted source for inspiration and actionable insights for responsible business practices. Subscribe on your favorite streaming platforms to be notified of new episodes drop bi-weekly on Tuesday mornings, and connect with us at ESG Decoded on social media or by visiting www.climeco.com.